Use a calculator to find the sum. Round the results to 2 decimal places. So we can see why the calculator is going to be helpful with these two problems. These are ones that would be sort of messy to have to work through by hand. We could do it, but it would just take a lot more work. So let's pull up our calculator and take a look at what we've got here. So I'll clear everything out. So our first problem, we have a negative number plus a negative number. So when we're doing these on the calculator, we want to be sure that we use this symbol down here at the bottom for our negative sign, and that we don't use the subtraction sign over here. We want to be sure that we keep those squared away. The other thing we're going to need to be using, we're going to use the decimal number, the decimal point for our decimal numbers, and we're going to use the fraction key when we get to the fraction problems. So let's take a look at this first problem. So we have a negative, and then it's 37,464, and then we want to be sure that we get the decimal point in place and the 7, 8. It's a good thing to just pause and make sure that everything's been entered in correctly and that you didn't press any numbers wrong. Now to that we're going to add, and we're going to go ahead and use the parentheses just like the problem does here. We're going to put in a parenthesis, and then we're going to do negative 12,519, and then we have a decimal point and a 6, so we have the 6 in the tenths place. Because we opened the parentheses, we want to be sure to close them. And so our answer here is going to be negative 49,984, and then we have 0.38. Now notice that the directions ask us to round to 2 decimal places. Well, our answer actually came out to 2 decimal places. So in this one, we aren't even going to have to do any rounding. So we're going to go ahead and jot down our final answer here. So we have negative 49,984.38. So negative 49,984.38. And let me just pull up our calculator to make sure that we wrote that down correctly. 94,984 and 38 hundredths. And be sure when you're writing the answer down by hand when it's this large that we put the comma in place. The calculator won't put the comma, but we want to be sure that we do that. Now for our second problem, we've got some fractions going on, so let me readjust my calculator, and we're going to clear this, and we're going to work this fraction problem. So we're going to be using the fraction key. So our first fraction, 325 121sts, so 325. And then we're going to use the fraction key before we put in the denominator, 122. And to that we're going to add the negative fraction. So we want to be sure that we do the addition, put the parenthesis, and then we're going to come down here and use the negative sign, 117 over 340. And again, because we opened the parenthesis, we want to be sure to close it. And when we press enter, we end up with quite a larger decimal portion this time. But remember, the directions had us round to 2 decimal places. And so we want to look to that 9, which is in the 3rd decimal place, because that 9 is going to tell us how we do our rounding. Because the 9 is 5 or greater, that means that 1 that's just to the left is going to have to round up to a 2. So our final answer would be 2.32, or 2 and 32 hundredths. So let's go ahead and write that down over here, 2 and 32 hundredths. And there we have our 2 answers to these 2 problems.